Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Today I'm checking out the Gigabyte RX 5700 XT gaming OC, and yep, it is another 5700 XT graphics card, but this one was actually selling pretty close to the $400 US MSRP. I say was because, well, like most 5700 XT models, availability has been a bit sketchy. Still, Gigabyte has informed me that their official MSRP for this particular model is $420 US, so at a guess, I'd say we're just looking at a supply issue here that is driving the price up at certain retailers. Kinda sucks, but that always seems to be the way with these new AMD products. It's very rare they launch without some kind of issue or shortage. That said, we have seen a few select models, a few select AIB models that are selling close to AMD's suggested retail price, so it's hard to say exactly what's going on here. Anyway, I'll discuss pricing more towards the end of the video when making my recommendation. For now, let's take a look at Gigabyte's gaming OC to see what it's all about. Design-wise, there's really no surprises here. I believe Gigabyte introduced this design with the first wave of GeForce RTX graphics cards about a year ago now, so you've no doubt seen similar looking products from Gigabyte before. Just quickly, what we have here is a WindForce 3X cooler, so that means there's three 80mm fans with the centrally located fans spinning in an alternate direction to that of the outer fans, and this has been done to reduce turbulent airflow, which improves cooling performance and reduces the operating volume. Unfortunately, in the event of a failure, the fans aren't easily replaceable like what we've found with the Sapphire Nitro Plus, but they can be individually replaced, so at least there's that. At first glance, this looks like it might be a dual slot card, but unfortunately it isn't, and it will take up 3 expansion slots. The card measures 49.5mm wide, 280mm long, and 114mm tall, so it's still quite compact for a triple fan graphics card. All up, it weighs in at just 916 grams, which is actually quite light for an RX 5700 XT graphics card. In fact, that only makes it slightly heavier than the 980 gram MSI Evoke OC, and that wasn't a particularly impressive product. So, I'm not expecting the gaming OC to match the much heavier 5700 XT, such as MSI's Gaming X, Sapphire's Nitro Plus, or PowerColor's Red Devil. Still, those models are quite expensive, and with a $420 US MSRP, the gaming OC is around $20 to $30 cheaper. Flipping the card over, we find the standard Gigabyte backplate for these entry-level OC models. It covers the entire card, it's black, and despite looking very plain and simple, it is at least functional, as Gigabyte's turned it into a heat spreader to extract heat from the PCB underneath, using a series of large thermal pads. Then, around at the I/O end of the card, we find a stock standard configuration, 3 display ports and a single HDMI port. There's also no dual BIOS switch or anything like that on this model, so let's just whip the cooler off and take a look at what's underneath. I have to say, this looks to be a very cost-efficient design. The copper heat pipes aren't nickel-plated, and rather than include a separate copper base plate, Gigabyte's using the copper pipes themselves to make direct contact with the GPU. This method is often referred to as direct touch, and it's claimed to be more efficient. It's certainly more cost efficient, but how it compares to using a smoother dedicated copper base plate is hard to say. In total, the cooler weighs 442 grams, and for context, that makes it 25% heavier than the cooler found on the MSI Evoke OC, but almost 70% lighter than the cooler used on MSI's Gaming X version. There's 5 6mm copper heat pipes in total, which transfer the heat through a series of aluminium fins, and the same heatsink is used to directly cool the GDDR6 memory, as well as the VRM, and the heat from these components is extracted using some aluminium plates. So it is a pretty basic cooler overall, but with 3 80mm fans pushing air over it, it should work well enough. Over on the PCB, we find an equally basic design. It's essentially a more compact version of AMD's reference design. The GPU gets a 7-phase VRM, and power is fed into the graphics card using 2 PCIe power connectors. There's a single 8-pin and then one 6-pin connector. As usual for these graphics card reviews, I've started by firing up F1 2019 and then ran it on a loop for an hour. This saw the gaming OC peak at just 66 degrees in a 21-degree room inside the Corsair Crystal 570X, fully populated with 120mm fans, and as usual we will compare this result with other 5700 XTs we've tested so far a little bit later on in the video. Now, in order to maintain this temperature, the fans spun at 1900 RPM, and while that's a reasonably high fan speed, the card was surprisingly quiet. Again, we'll compare the operating volume with other cards tested in a moment. As for the GDDR6 temp, we saw the memory peak at just 82 degrees, which is very hot and certainly one of the hottest memory temperatures we've seen from an AIB model. Now for overclocking, with the limits reached, we saw a peak operating temperature of 75 degrees, and this saw the fans spinning at between 1900 and 2000 RPM, but again, it was surprisingly quiet given the fan speed. I wasn't actually able to run this card stable at the maximum 2150 MHz. 2100 MHz was as fast as I could go, and this saw the GPU run at 1980 MHz on average. But I was able to max out the memory at 950 MHz, though this meant the memory was now running at a rather toasty 92 degrees. Okay, so let's move on to some actual benchmarks. As usual, we're testing in our Core i9 1900K GPU test rig. The CPU's been overclocked to 5 GHz, and we have 16 GB of DDR4 3400 memory. The latest drivers available at the time of testing have been used, and for this one we have just a few select games to look at. First up, we have Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and as usual, we see very little benefit from overclocking the 5700 XT in this title. Out of the box, the Gaming OC matched MSI's Gaming X and the ASRock Tai Chi, then overclocked it was a frame faster than the overclocked Tai Chi. And that's a pretty strong result, but it was also just a 2 FPS increase over stock, so kinda pointless. We also see a very minor 4% performance bump for the manual overclock when testing with Forza Horizon 4, but this is typical for a 5700 XT. And finally, performance was as expected when testing with Shadow of the Tomb Raider. The Gaming OC did enjoy an 8% performance boost here, and that allowed it to match the stock MSI RTX 2070 Super Gaming X Trio. Gigabyte has done a good job optimizing the Gaming OC, and here we see that power draw is very similar to that of the AMD reference model. When compared to the recently released ASRock Tai Chi, for example, the Gaming OC consumed 17% less power, and that means the cooler will have to deal with a lot less heat. When measuring total system draw, we again see that the Gaming OC is very similar to the AMD reference card in terms of power draw. That being the case, I wasn't surprised to learn that the Gigabyte Gaming OC is the coolest 5700 XT we've tested, beating the much larger and much heavier MSI Gaming X model by a degree. Of course, the fans on the Gigabyte card were spinning much faster, but as you'll see in a moment when we look at the operating volume results, it wasn't that loud. The VRM did run a bit hot on this GPU, nothing crazy. Here we're looking at a peak load temperature of 71 degrees, and that's pretty typical for a 5700 XT. As an example, it was just a degree hotter than the Red Devil and Tai Chi models. The GDDR6 memory though, it ran even hotter again, peaking at a surprisingly high 82 degrees, and that's the same temperature we recorded using the MSI Evoke OC, and that means the memory on the Gaming OC doesn't run that much cooler than the AMD reference model. Overclocked, the memory temperature shot up to 92 degrees, and at that point things are starting to get a little too hot. The good news is the Gaming OC is a relatively quiet graphics card, despite the reasonably high fan speed. In terms of operating volume, it's comparable to the Sapphire Nitro Plus, and a little quieter than the Power Color Red Devil, so a great result there. Okay, so the Gigabyte Gaming OC is another solid looking 5700 XT graphics card, and it runs pretty cool and quiet, with the only exception being the memory, which is a little on the high side. Certainly not ideal, but it's not really a deal breaker either. Truth is, I've not seen a 5700 XT graphics card yet that I wouldn't purchase for about $20 US over the MSRP, so it really all comes down to the price, and unfortunately most models are fetching a bit more than a $20 US premium. Anyway, the Gigabyte Gaming OC, that's been heavily requested by you guys for me to check out, and obviously the reason for that was due to the fact that it was selling for just $20 US over the MSRP. Unfortunately, at the time of making this video, the $420 US Newegg.com listing has been removed due to no stock. But they are selling it at SuperBiz for $419 US, so at least you can grab one over there if you are based in the US. At $420 US, the Gaming OC is a cracking good deal. That makes it $10 cheaper than the MSI Evoke OC and $20 cheaper than Power Color's Red Devil. Locally here in Australia though, it costs $20 Aussie more than the Red Devil and just $10 less than the MSI Gaming X, so that's not great, and at that price I think I'd rather go with either of those competing options. Gigabyte really needs to get the Gaming OC down to at least $730 Australian in order for it to be worth purchasing here locally. Anyway, if you can get it for $730 Aussie or $420 US, then I strongly recommend you check it out, as it is really good value at those prices. And that is going to do it for this one. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to subscribe, like if you liked the video. And if you appreciate the work we do at Unboxed and you want to get more involved with the channel, then you can head over to the link that'll send you to our Patreon page. There's a few different tiers there. monthly access to monthly live stream. That's always a lot of fun. Discord chat, great community on there. Get involved in the Q&As, and there's a few other cool things. So anyway, check it out if you are interested. And above all else, thank you for watching. I'm your host, Steve, and I'll see you again next time.